Good afternoon to you. I'm Danilo Evangelista, and welcome to today's tropical weather outlook for Wednesday, June 24th, 2026. Today, we're going to take a look at what is happening across the Atlantic and the Pacific and in the world of tropics, as we typically do every video. And, of course, we're going to take a look at the week ahead and when we should next look for tropical development here, especially in the Atlantic. But we'll also take a look at the Pacific, too, as things will continue to heat up over the coming weeks. Starting off with the tropical weather bulletin from the National Hurricane Center, and this is where our information originates from, usually every single video. This and also, the global models that we typically look at on a daily basis here. And right now, the National Hurricane Center not expecting anything to develop in the Atlantic over the next 7 days. Things are nice and quiet for now. But obviously, we will look at whether or not the models hint at that and whether or not the models show any signs of potential development. And we'll do that in a little bit. But the Pacific, though, we already have areas of interest, of particular interest that the National Hurricane Center is watching. One of them, Invest 94E, 40% chance of development right now in the next 48 hours and 7 days. And this might develop. It's trying, but it's running out of time. But if this doesn't develop, we have another area of interest here, which will more than likely develop. 60% chance of development right now. And either way, we are probably going to get something else here in the Pacific very, very soon. And especially in the next few weeks here, as El Nino really kicks up and the atmospheric forcing becomes much more favorable in the basin. This hurricane season in the Pacific is really going to begin to come to life, and we're probably going to be tracking not just something forming here, but more than likely a hurricane, and probably a major hurricane very, very soon. Not necessarily sure if it's going to come out of this area here, but it's more than likely going to happen here in the Pacific very soon, especially given the overall background state for this year is supposed to be very favorable, given El Nino. And it's only a matter of time before all of those things come together and we see the fruits of that actually happen in real time. But we're already starting to see things here become more active in the Pacific. And let's start there in terms of our venture into the tropics today with a satellite shot right now. And you could generally see how the Pacific has, favorable atmospheric forcing in place. Things are generally favoring the Pacific this year. In terms of convective activity, and you can already see that right now. Lots of convective activity present throughout the basin. We have a pretty nice blow up here, just off the southern coast of Mexico, probably associated with a tropical wave or something like that, which came from the Atlantic. And then we also have this interesting area here, especially on the northern fringes of it, that is associated with Invest 94E, which, taking a closer look at it, you could definitely see that Invest 94E is churning, it's spinning. Some sort of spin is visible. There's probably a low-level center here of some sort. The question is whether or not it is able to fully close off in the next few hours or so before environmentally things will probably become less favorable for this system as it moves on off to the west-northwest here, and probably will run into dry air. And you can already see the cloud tops slightly warmer right now, not really blowing up as much deep convection. So it's trying, but maybe it's, coin flip slightly less in terms of whether or not this is actually going to develop. But regardless, as I mentioned before, we have multiple things here likely coming in the Pacific, and I'll show you that with the models in just a little bit. The Atlantic, on the other hand, not much happening right now. The Pacific looks very active, lots of thunderstorm activity, lots of rising motion. And in the Atlantic, on the other hand, it is very barren. You can see, especially in the eastern Atlantic here, for miles on end, it almost looks like there's no convective activity whatsoever. We do have these occasional tropical waves which come off the coast of Africa, and some of these waves have been looking interesting here in the last few days, but nothing looks like it is going to develop right now. We do have an interesting, upper level low feature just to the south of Bermuda, and sometimes these upper level lows, especially in the subtropics, can drill down low level centers to the surface, and especially in the subtropics here, sometimes we can get some subtropical cyclone development. But that probably will happen later on in the year because most of the water temperatures right now are still probably not warm enough, especially further out in the ocean you go, but they will definitely more than likely get warmer as the year progresses. But we will generally have to watch off the southeast coast here. You can see that there's a front kind of slowly moving across the Atlantic right now towards the east. And as I mentioned before in the early season, and I'll show you the climatology map later on too, again, off the southeast coast and in the Gulf and in general, closer to home here, we would typically watch that area in the early season for development in the Atlantic. And taking a look at the vorticity right now, in terms of an actual map, first of all, you could actually see the front here. It is definitely very pronounced and definitely has a few, kinks in the vorticity here. And this is why we watch these frontal systems sometimes as they move off the coast of the United States here, because especially on the southern end of the front, and you could actually see this right now here, there's kind of a vortmax here on the southern end on the southern end of the front, and sometimes these pieces of vorticity can break off and try to develop on their own and develop their own convection and sometimes organize into quick spin-up tropical systems here off the southeast coast, or sometimes they even develop from the Gulf side as well. And more than likely when that happens, that probably brings impacts to the United States. And it just in general, given that when we have development closer to home, usually some impacts are felt on the coast. So we'll have to watch here off the southeast coast over the next few days and probably the next few weeks here for development, obviously as we're in the early season, but not just because we are generally in the early season. I'm giving you a hint there as to what I'm going to talk about here in just a little bit, but really quickly, looking at the rest of the map here, some energy in the Atlantic, probably associated with a tropical wave here, although nothing is consolidating there. Off to the very left here, though, in the Pacific, you could see what I assume to be part of the energy of 94E, and you could definitely see has some decent vorticity with it, but obviously not fully consolidated. You don't see that, round, defined shape that you typically see in the vorticity map when you're, tracking a tropical system. So 94E still has some work to do, and it's running out of time. So we'll see whether or not it actually is able to develop, but probably slightly less than a coin flip chance right now. All right, let's take a look at the models here, starting off with the GFS and starting off in the Atlantic. And I want to take you out into time here over the next week. And nothing really pronounced happens until we get to around 7 days out. And you can see that we have this pretty interesting front here, which, situates itself in the Western Atlantic. And then I'm going to show you just beyond 7 days. Interestingly enough, the GFS again, like I said before, breaks off some energy, and then it tries to consolidate here closer to the east coast of the United States. And so the phenomenon that I tell you that we need to watch for in the early season, looks like the GFS is doing it here on the 12Z run. And especially in a year like this, again, given that a good portion of the deep tropics, especially throughout a good portion of the season, more than likely, will be very much completely shut down. Most of our development really will come from the southeast and in the subtropics this year, because that's generally where the atmosphere is more than likely going to be the most favorable for tropical development, and also where more than likely the steering is going to favor activity to go towards. So eventually here we're going to get something to develop off the East Coast. Now, whether or not this signal here that the GFS seemingly shows within the 7 to 10 day time frame, maybe will that actually develop and be something that we'll need to watch, especially as we head into early July? We will see. But let's really quickly look here at some other models, especially the AI models, and sometimes the AI models really pick up on these signals, and looks like not much is showing up on the AI operational on the 12Z run. Let's see, what about the AI GFS? See if they show anything. Also not much. Let's see what the European has. Little bit of piece of vorticity here, again, coming from the front and breaks off from the front and comes off the East Coast and tries to consolidate, but I guess fails to do so. So we'll see what happens here in the Atlantic over the next few weeks, and I'll show you the ensembles in a little bit. The ensembles do show something happening. but of course I'll show you that in just a little bit. But in the Eastern Pacific, on the other hand, you can see here the energy associated. Actually, I believe that is 94E, and that kind of, struggles to consolidate. But then it looks like there's another area that develops here, and I believe that's probably the 60% chance AOI that the National Hurricane Center has. And you can see definitely develop some sort of, rigorous low-level vortex, tries to consolidate on the vorticity signature here, but more than likely it'll be a weak system that moves out to sea and probably will not be any harm to land. But then beyond that, you can see that there's more activity here that does happen in the Eastern Pacific. So the Pacific will probably be getting more and more active, and whatever we have now is just the beginning. But really quickly, going back to the Atlantic, I showed you the European AI operational, and here's a look at the ensembles. And if you're not familiar with what ensembles are, they pretty much are kind of just different versions of the model showing different solutions. And you can see, especially here in the next 7 days or so, again off of the East Coast, a few low pressure signals, nothing very strong right now, but especially when you're talking about 7 to 10 days and definitely beyond, you kind of have to look at specifically just the slight signals that you see on the models, and not necessarily latch on to like any one particular solution just yet. And taking a look at the regular European ensembles too, they seemingly show as well some interesting things that happen. There's one ensemble that actually brings us makes this a pretty aggressive system here in the Gulf. Obviously, we'll see whether or not that happens, but in general, you could see, again, off the East Coast here, the ensembles become a little bit more active as we head into the end of this month and into the first week of July, which is roughly about a week from now. So, and once again, climatology-wise, in June, and I should have brought up the climatology map for July here, but June, one of the early season months, the Gulf and off the southeast, that is typically where we typically see the most amount of tropical development in the Atlantic, and that is where we are seeing the ensembles begin to show something here in the next week or so. And then not just June, but July as well. Here's July, even more pronounced, especially off the East Coast here. We see even more pronounced activity in July. So I believe it is fairly safe to say that maybe as we get into early July, our attention will have to turn here in the Atlantic to the southeast coast and see whether or not we are able to get some frontal action and get any tropical development from there. And obviously, we have no clue as to whether or not that's going to happen, or whether or not it's going to affect the United States, or where it's going to track yet. So no specifics as of just yet. Right now, we're just focusing on a time frame in which we might have to watch for development, and it'll be interesting to see whether or not early July will be that time frame. But obviously, as time goes by and as the week goes by here, we will find it out. And if you want to stay tuned here and see whether or not that actually happens, and see whether or not the tropics actually produce, I suggest you subscribe to the channel and get these videos on a daily basis, because we're going to be continuing to do them, and I'll definitely continue to update you on the tropics as things develop here. So we'll be watching very closely in the next few weeks. With that being said, I'm going to end it off for today's video. Hope you enjoyed what you saw today, and I hope you guys enjoy the rest of your day. Stay safe. Peace, love, and kindness to you all. I'm Danilo Evangelista. I'll be back with more tomorrow.